quite frankly, it's kind of unusual.
It's quite Franklin.
Got it. Quite Franklin.
When you set a goal in life and you have that initial motivation, you know how it is. Like, you're really excited. You're coming out of the gate.
That fire.
Yeah, the fire. The ring of fire. And so when you have that and then suddenly that fades, whether you're 7 days into the process, 1 month into the process, or whatever it may be, the first thing you have to do before you even actually set that goal is find out what your why is. Because if your why, for example, I want to go to the gym and I want to lose weight. Now, we're coming up on the new year. This is the common goal. Like, next year is going to be my best year ever. I'm going to lose weight. My beach body, whatever it is, I'm going to lose 20 pounds by the spring type of thing, right? I would imagine the most popular New Year's resolution is losing weight.
It has to be.
Yeah, followed by
easy.
What would you say? Followed by maybe like quit smoking?
No.
What would be number two?
I feel like we did really good in our DARE campaigns, and people that do the vaping it doesn't like correlate that that's smoking.
Yeah, but it's still, anyway, we don't want to get sidetracked on that. But I would say that the number one New Year's resolution is
it's lose weight, look better.
Sure. And so you begin to dwindle as you get into this. I don't know, a week off the new year, a month off the new year, wherever it may be. And so you got to ask yourself, well, what is your reason for doing that? I would imagine that a high percentage of the people that want to lose weight obviously want to do this for vanity purposes.
Look better, man.
Yeah, and that's an extrinsic reason. Like, you're extrinsically motivated by being able to look at yourself. Now, if the vanity is tied into more confidence or whatever that may be, then you could possibly argue that it's a bit more intrinsic. But either way, when you're setting a goal, like, your motivation needs to be more intrinsic. For example, when I was training for my career to fight and I wanted to become a world champion, if I was solely motivated on just getting that belt wrapped around my waist, like that physical object, the moment that you get that thing around your waist, it's like, well, that goes away. Like, all this work that I had for that one moment, like that moment in the ring for me lasted mere minutes. And we're talking years of sacrifice, right? So you suddenly realize that there's this emptiness on the back end. So then it's like, well, what is my why, really? Why was I training? Well, part of that is that I had a childhood dream of being an athlete. Part of it is that I wanted to be a good role model for people. Part of it is that it was a healthy lifestyle for me. Now, one could argue whether or not fighting was a healthy lifestyle. I don't want to get into that debate. That's a whole different debate. But being an athlete and exercising and the nutrition aspect of it, like, that part of it was the healthy aspect. But either way, this was a lifestyle thing for me. So it was more than just being motivated by some external thing. So I'm not setting a New Year's resolution just for some extrinsic reward.
Right.
So that I look better, or I can step on a scale and I've lost 10 pounds. Do you ever set New Year's resolutions?
Not usually, because I set monthly goals. So when I set monthly goals, I don't really have resolutions. For instance, I just finished walking across America, surprise, surprise. And you told me as we were finishing, you told me the story about the belt, and then you looked at me, you were like, so how's this feel?
Yeah.
Because it's done. And I was
exactly.
like, that's cool. I had so many other days because of the purpose of what it was.
Exactly.
That drove it home.
Keep in mind, you and I had that conversation early on because before we started this walk, I say we as if I was actually walking with you, but before we started this walk together, before we started this walk, like, we had that conversation. Remember, we laid out the timetable initially, like, I should be here by this date and here by this date and here by this date.
Yeah, you had me like hopping on 1 foot by day 3.
No, you had you hopping on 1 foot because you're the one that walks like 5 miles an hour. It's crazy, your walking speed. But either way, I distinctly remember that we got to a point where we were way off where we thought we would be.
Right.
And you said that this walk is not about the destination, but it's about the impact that we're making during the walk. And so when we were at Santa Monica that day, I keep saying we as if I was there the whole time.
Well, you were there.
Literally.
In Santa Monica. You're right about that.
For the record, I walked with him one day in Cincinnati, and then I did show up and walk like a final mile with him in California. And I think of how many miles did you walk?
3,822.
Yeah, I walked probably 3 of those miles, maybe. That's being generous at that. So we did do this walk together. But no, when we were there that day, remember we talked about that, but you
We
had
did.
already set this whole thing was not really just about the destination for you, even without that. But
Right.
that the statement that you made about the impact and how the walk took a lot longer, because externally people would say like, wow, like it took you that long to walk across the country. And it's like, well, yeah, because in between you were stopping at hospitals, walking with kids, and
Right.
and attending events and doing media and raising awareness and raising money and helping families.
Right.
And so it became more about the impact. And so when you finished, this was more about the fact that you lived that for the last 9 months of your life. But either
Yeah.
way, I'm sure, particularly when we talked about Texas, for example, you had days where you were walking through Texas and you're like, what am I doing? Because it was just this no man's land out
Right.
there, right? And so, but it's like, well, no, this is my purpose. This is my why. This is why I'm doing it. Not because I want to reach that finish line, not because I have people waiting on me.
90 days straight walking in the desert will make you lose your mind. But that's just like life. You're going to hit those barren patches of,
Yeah.
right? And you're going to always want to quit.
Yeah.
But then you got to get back to that why.
So I'll say this along the lines of the why. This is another thing that I think will help people not lose their motivation. This is something I learned from Darcy Gechter. She was the lady that wrote Amazon Woman, who
Amazon, yep.
she kayaked the entire Amazon source to sea. And it was interesting because I've done some kayaking in my life, obviously nothing to her level, or whitewater rafting for that matter. And she said that she was talking about the river. She said that when the initial piece of the river before they hit the flat water was this very turbulent water. And so it was like, you're solving this problem and you got to solve the puzzle,
Right.
get through, pick your line in the river, and then you hit that line. And once you get through that puzzle, then, whether you have some flat water or whatever, you hit the next set of rapids, right? And you're essentially solving one puzzle after the next. She said that's really a metaphor for life. And this is a really light bulb moment for me because I'm the kind of person, like, I enjoy the grind of life. I enjoy difficulties, and I enjoy it because it's like I always tell myself, this is what separates me from the average person, because most people want to live in that bubble, that circle of comfort that they live in. But when you take this mindset of like someone who is, for example, kayaking down the river, it's like, imagine if you're just on flat water, like canoeing. I've been canoeing before. You've been canoeing. Like if you canoe enough miles, you're going to get to a point where you're like, okay, I need some sort of excitement. Like, yeah, exactly. Right. Like I need some adversity. And so that's essentially the way life is. Like if you were just going through life on flat water the whole time, then you have zero adversity, like anything to keep you interested in what it is that you're doing. So it's these problems that actually really excite people in life. Like that's truly what keeps you moving. And those are the things that should motivate you rather than getting you to the point where you decide. So when you're 7 days in or you're 30 days into that weight loss program, when you set that New Year's resolution and you suddenly hit that first obstacle, like, oh man, I thought I was going to lose 5 pounds this week, but I only lost 1 pound, and what's going on? It's like, well, that was the first set of rapids you hit in your kayak. So invite that problem in, solve that problem, finish that rapid, and then move on to the next one. Don't let yourself fold on that. Otherwise you're just going to drown in the river, using the metaphor.
I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people they get caught up on that. And if you stay looking in the rearview mirror, you're going to crash, right? So
Obviously the other half of this is that this culture of instant gratification that we live in, right? It's just anything like, I'm willing to take this pill to help me lose weight because I don't want to put the hours and hours and hours into the gym. And that's just obviously one example, but particularly, we live in a culture of instant gratification. Like even me growing up in the 80s, pre-internet world, like we had I don't remember when TV dinners were invented, but there was a time when they didn't exist, and then suddenly you had TV dinners, and it was like, you just have this meal in a microwave in 5 minutes type of thing. And that's about as instant gratification as you could get at the time. And so
right.
Even my generation is, infected with this ideology of instant gratification, but it's even worse now. Like in this social media generation, I remember the first time I went onto TikTok, for example, and I'm like, how could people be entertained by like 5-second or 15-second videos. And then you
Yep.
understand, like somebody runs into a wall and you're like, oh, that's hilarious. Let me see the next one. And you're literally getting this instant gratification, 5 to 15 seconds.
There goes an
time.
hour.
Right, yeah, right. And then an hour's gone, which that's a whole different podcast to talk
Oh,
about.
yeah.
But the point is that we're so, our attention span and our ability to focus on something for an extended period of time, particularly something when it comes to like a weight loss or
Yeah.
learning a skill like playing a piano or studying your Bible and learning scripture or whatever it may be, these things, like they're very time intensive. And I look at this modern generation, I'm like, man, it's just tougher and tougher for them to maintain their motivation to stick into these goals.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go with it, actually.
Yeah.
You and I are devoted Christians, but I think having faith, whatever your faith is, like believing, right? Even if it's the Buddhist mindset and meditating and all this stuff, right? Like there's an importance to having that faith through those troubled times.
I'm with you on that, but I'll say this, man.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Come on, in Book of James, man. As a Christian, faith without works is dead, right? And so I can have faith that I'm going to, for example, going back to the original discussion, that I can have faith that I'm going to lose weight, but the reality is like I can't just sit there with my faith. Like I have to actually do something about it. That's applicable to losing weight. It's applicable to your Christian walk. It's applicable to just life in general.
100%.
Yeah. So
what's that story about the guy in the boat that's drowning? And like he says, "Don't worry, God will save me."
Yeah.
And then the 3 people come by, and then God's looking at him like, once he gets to heaven, like, "Well, I sent you 3 people."
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Where he's like, no, don't worry about it. God's going to save me. I'm good to go. No, but yeah. So I mean, yeah, faith is a big portion of it. But at the same time, I mean, this would get into a bunch of other stuff we talk on other podcasts. But having a proper game plan to lose the weight, it's like once you've established that game plan, it's like, no, I have faith that this game plan is going to work. I got to stick with it, but I also have to take action, and that was the point that I was making. One last thing I'll mention here is that, like, in order to achieve your goals, to stay motivated, is like you have to set realistic expectations for what you are going to accomplish, or in this case we've talked about losing weight, like a realistic timeline. You're not going to lose that 30 or 50 pounds that you wanted to lose in week 1 or month 1 for that matter. And what's even more difficult, particularly like with losing weight or any goal that you really set, is as time goes on, it typically tends to get more difficult as time goes on. Like I've noticed this when I'm learning a foreign language, when I'm learning to play an instrument. Out of the gate, like you can make these leaps and bounds improvements. Like, oh wow, I can start to maintain time. But then when I'm playing my drums, for example, and I want to learn a new tip or trick or something, man, it takes like weeks of practice just to learn this one new thing. And so it's like as your goal goes on, it takes more and more effort to maintain that or to continue upping that level. And so similarly with this idea of losing weight on a New Year's resolution, it's like, well, you're going to lose some good weight out of the gate. This fools a lot of people. Week 1, man, I dropped 8 pounds in week 1. But then when you fast forward and you're 14 weeks into the process, that week you only lost like 1.5 pounds, and you're kind of like, man, what's going on? Because it just gets more difficult as you go. But that's where you having faith in the process, continue taking action, and left foot. I always say this one. You're the walker, but
Here we go. Yep.
we talked about doing the Appalachian Trail together, right?
Yeah.
And there are times where like you're in that grind and it's just left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And when you get fatigued, like we put 16 miles down one day on the AT, and I was like, and I just kept saying left foot, right foot, left foot, right. Like I'm not going to stop, right? That's it. That's it,
man. Click clack.
Exactly.
Yep.
Quite Franklin is providing this podcast as a public service, but it is neither a legal interpretation nor legal advice, nor a statement of Quite Franklin policy. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation of that product or entity by Rich Franklin or Quite Franklin. The views expressed by guests on the podcast are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by Quite Franklin employees or representatives are the views and opinions of the persons expressing them, and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Quite Franklin or any of its officials or principals. Nothing heard on this podcast at any time is medical advice or is intended as medical advice. The listener must always consult his or her personal physician or other qualified medical professional regarding any questions of a medical nature. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact our general counsel.